Your eyes open to dark wood, smoke, and heath the ceiling beams of a modest Athenian home. Summer air presses the walls from outside. Inside, the air presses back. Breath, fever, the sour bite of stale water in a clay cup. The city is trapped behind its own walls, crowded to bursting because your leaders promised safety there from Sparta. Safety, they said. Instead, it's a kill. You're Erin, a potter's daughter in the Karameikos. You used to measure days by the hiss of the kill and the soft scrape of a burnisher against red clay. Now you count time by the distance between. Wails in the street. Your little brother Lycan sleeps beside you or tries to. His skin shines with sweat, though the air is still. You wet a cloth and touch it to his forehead. He flinches not from cold, but from pain that lives just under the skin. His breath comes too fast, as if he's sprinting while lying down. Drink, you whisper, lifting the cup. Water tastes like clay, like heat, like a promise it can't keep. He swallows, then coughs, a broken, scraping thing, from the doorway. Your mother watches with eyes that seem older than last week. Her hands are cracked from washing, hauling, lifting. There's barley porridge simmering in a blackened pot, more hope than meal. You used to flavor it with herbs. The herb seller's stall stands empty now. He stopped opening it after his wife's face turned grey and still outside. Voices tangle, a priest's chant, a neighbor shouting a name with the soft rising hope of those who haven't yet accepted the answer, a clay jar shattering on stone. Somewhere closer, a fist hits a door. It keeps hitting. When the sun climbs, it burns without mercy. Athens used to glitter in light the Parthenon, a crisp cutout against a blue so clean it hummed. Now heat only lifts the smell of sickness. You open the shutters a thumb's width and swallow what you see. Litters borne fast, faces covered. A line at the fountain where no one speaks. Two men with scarves tied over their noses, dragging a pallet with what the living refuse to name. You were a child when you learned to throw clay. Your father would center the lump and let it wobble. Under your hands, find the rhythm, he said. The still place at the spinning center. You search for that still place now, but the world spins. Off dash true. The rash arrives as if punctuating a sentence you refuse to read. Lycan dozes. You pull his tunic open and see the first angry dots scattered along his chest, the kind you've heard about, whispered like a curse. By evening they bloom into pustules raised, tight, hurting to look at. He shifts, moans. Back hurts, he murmurs. You rub his shoulders with oil that used to be used for beauty and now is used for mercy. Thump then, another, at your door. You tense, then breathe when you hear Theron, the neighbor who still knocks before entering. He's gaunt, even though, just last month, he looked like a man built by the gods for carrying amphorae. Now he cradles his arm, his hand trembling. Erin. He says, the waterline is shorter at dawn. I can carry 2 jars for you. He doesn't wait for thanks. Help has grown quiet lately, like a man who doesn't want to call attention to himself. Night. The city sounds different when it's afraid. Fewer liars, more prayers, fewer arguments about politics, more names repeated to the dark. You try to sleep on a mat near your brother, counting the seconds of cool between fever waves. Your mother snores, suddenly just a catch of sound, and you feel grateful she's still here, to make any noise at all. Gratitude feels like a small flame cupped in both hands. In the morning, the porridge is thin. You add a pinch of salt and tell yourself it's better that way when you pass the bowl to Lycan. He swallows a spoonful. It comes back up. He apologizes as if he's done you a wrong, and you want to knock apology right out of the world. So no one says it again for anything they can't control. The priest passes your threshold later, leaving a sprig of laurel and a muttered blessing. For those inside, he avoids your eyes. You used to respect the calm of his voice. Now you respect people who carry water at the fountain. You stand apart from the others, as everyone does, as if respect for space could be a wall stronger than stone. The woman in front of you wears a grey veil and does not turn when you say, "Good morning," but you can feel the thanks in the line of her shoulders when you keep 6 arm lengths between you. There's a rumour on the line. Pericles is ill. You let the names slide off your mind because if the city's tallest tree can burn, what chance do the reeds have? Another woman says her husband saw a general fall from his horse yesterday, not stabbed, just folded like wet leather. You think of your brother folding, and the sun tilts. Back home, you boil water until it hisses like a warning. You don't know if it saves anyone, but at least it gives you a task. Leakin sleeps again, skin hot, and your mother murmurs a folk remedy you could recite with her mouth closed. The pustules redden, then crust. You tell yourself that's a good sign. You tell yourself many things. Midday, there's commotion at the end of your street. Men arguing under the shade of a fig tree about the dead who have no one left to carry them. The sacred way is to bury, one insists. The sacred way, another spits, is 4 times that are not this. They compromise the way men do when their hearts are breaking, with a shrug that hides tears as evening spills in. Eyes clear for the first time in 2 days. The kill, he whispers. You promised to show me how to pull a cup at the last breath. He means the moment when the fire's done and the heat stops talking and the clay remembers it wanted to be stone all along. You smile like a liar. When you're well, you say, "I'll show you 2 tricks. Night brings thieves and singing. You're not sure which you hate more. You sit in the doorway with a mallet across your knees. You're not strong, but you are stubborn. When a thin shadow pauses at your threshold, you lift the mallet and bare your teeth. The shadow drifts on. You don't know whether to feel brave or merely lucky. He survives the night. Not everyone does. In the pale wash before dawn, your mother's head falls to her chest in exhausted sleep and you sneak a laugh. Into the morning because it feels like a treason against despair. Leakin asks for water and keeps it down. His eyes are brighter though. His lips crack when he smiles. And then, because the gods love balance like a potter loves a scented will, your mother coughs. Not a clearing cough. The first cough. The one that pulls your stomach hard and down. You help her lie back. The fever comes for her like a tax collector who knows your full name. You divide water, time, touch. You learn the math of mercy. You discover hands can be both soft and unyielding. You ignore the knock when it's about anything but help. You sleep in stitches and eat in crumbs. You refuse to let anyone under your roof die thirsty. On the 5th day, a breeze slips through the window and doesn't smell like sickness. Leakin sleeps on his side. A spot of drool dampening the map proof that the body can be goofy even after it's been a battlefield. Your mother's fever breaks at noon, sudden as rain. She trembles as if something left her through the soles of her feet. You step outside and the sky is insultingly beautiful. Someone somewhere argues about the gods. Someone somewhere else is kind in a way no law required. A boy runs, laughing, because boys run even in a city that doesn't know what tomorrow costs. You carry a jar to the fountain. Theron is there, thinner but standing. He nods and says nothing, and in that nothing you hear, "I am still here." You nod back. So am I. What is life like inside history's worst pandemics? It's thirst and heat and the courage to touch a forehead. It's arguing about ritual because you need a rule to hold. It's waking to a city that still manages a sunrise and choosing, again, to keep another person alive until dark. You walk home with your jar, shoulders square, counting steps, counting breaths, counting the small victories that look like nothing. To a god and everything, to a sister. Asterisk, a fist pounds your door at dawn, 3 quick knocks. A pause, 2 slow ones. That's Gaius, your neighbor, on the 2nd floor of the insula. He's been using that pattern since soldiers returned from the east with pockets full of coin and lungs full of something no coin can buy off. You are Lee, scribe by trade, daughter of a freedwoman, a woman who spent a decade making other men's words behave on wax tablets. Until recently your morning sounded like stylus on wood, like street sellers singing fresh figs and hot bread. Now the morning coughs. You open the door and pull your scarf over your face out of habit more than hope. Gaius stands, their eyes bright with the bad kind of heat. He keeps his distance, the way everyone now marks the space between bodies. Lee, he says, half a laugh left in him. You still owe me a story about the time you copied an edict wrong and turned a senator's modest donation into a modest donkey. You'll live to hear it, you say, then lie. To him with the confidence of a friend. Sit, I have willow decoction. It tastes worse than it works. He refuses the stool, leaning against the doorpost instead. The rash speckling his neck is early and ugly, and he scratches until you grab his wrist, gentle but firm. Don't you say, you want scars? Fine. You want infection? No. He laughs at that weakly and coughs into his elbow. A red star blooms on the linen. You press your lips together. He pretends not to notice, your eyes notice. Agreement achieved. We will not name the blood. You pour the willow brew and watch him drink like a man who's been trekking under a hard sun. Rome is not a desert, but the plague turns even cool rooms into a thirst dot down in the street. A wagon rattles past. You peek over the balcony rail. 2 men sit on the wagon tongue. 3 more walk beside. There's no cargo you can name. There is weight you can feel. The men have tied cloths over their faces. They do not look up. They never look up. The city stumbles through routines, because routine is the last thread that holds a mind together. The baker still shapes loaves. The launderer still snaps sheets. The girls who carry jugs still walk in pairs, though their songs have thinned to hums. Up on the Palatine, someone important pretends to schedule a feast and then regretfully cancels it. The gods, if they're watching, comment to one another that men still love theatre even when the plots are cruel. Your work used to be steady. Temple accounts, marriage contracts, the occasional lawsuit where 2 men made something simple complicated because pride is a very Roman god. In the last month, your tablet fills with names, dates, a line, witnesses unable to attend. The wax does not hold tears. That is a mercy. Your mother was practical in all things, especially grief. If the pot cracks, she said, you do not scold the clay. You patch or you pour into another bowl. You repeat that now when the upstairs baby hiccups into tired crying and his father sings off-key. Because maybe all the gods are listening for off-key. By noon. Gaius has drunk your willow, slept on your stool, and sweated twice through his tunic. He wakes confused. You feed him broth made of yesterday's bones and today's stubbornness. He keeps it down, victory, small, private, the size of a thumbprint. On wax, but a victory that steadies your hand. In the afternoon, you walk. Not far, just to the market square for garlic and green things and news. The fishmonger shouts that his catch is fresh, and no one asks how he knows. We let some lies stand because they hold the day together. You pass a shrine where a woman leaves. A string of beads, and a man leaves nothing but his breath, sharp in winter air. A proclamation is pinned crooked to a post. The emperor says public funds will bury the poor. You think of the men on the wagon. You think of a treasury that can count coins but not lives. You tuck your chin into your scarf and buy garlic because it's something to chop, something to make the pan speak the language of home. You return to find Gaius sitting on your floor with his back against your bed, the stool abandoned. Comfort, he says, when you look at him. Beds are too ambitious. He grins like a boy who climbed a forbidden fig tree. He's older than you. He's allowed to be a boy when he wants. You place cool cloths on his wrists and ankles. His skin is too hot. He is grateful, but pretends to be annoyed, which is a healthy sign. You tell him about the donkey edict, and he wheezes laughter that turns to an ugly cough and back to a smile. Worth it, he whispers. Make the senator bray. Evening brings a wind. It prowls the insulus halls, lifting grey dust. Neighbor returns with empty arms. The man next door sings a prayer you don't know. Somewhere, someone claps in a rhythm that might be joy if you didn't know better. You make a bed for Gaius in your doorway, fresh straw, 2 folded blankets. A pillow that used to be your mother's. You don't sleep there yourself anymore. The straw remembers her shape too well. At dawn, he's worse. The pustules have multiplied, a pattern your pulse recognizes as threat. He tries to sit and fails. All right, you say, steady as mortar. We are going to do this the stubborn way. If you can drink, you can live. If you can live, you can hear me tell you how the senator tried to bribe me with pomegranates. You think briefly of the physician on the corner, the one who charges a half denarius to say, "We shall do our best," and an extra half to leave a bowl of something bitter. You have a quarter denarius and garlic. You choose garlic. You choose. The old cures, cool water, and hands that don't flinch. The second day slides into the third. Fever climbs and descends, an arrogant visitor who thinks your door is a hinge. On the 4th morning, the rash crusts at the edges. On the 6th, Gaius opens his eyes and, with majestic drama, requests figs. You fetch 2 and wash them twice, and watch him eat like a man meeting a miracle in the mouth. You do not dance in your kitchen. You do not clap. You press your palms to your eyes and whisper thanks directly into your skull, because gratitude feels fragile, like a bird you shouldn't startle. That afternoon, a messenger's boy runs the hall with a scroll for you from the temple, sealed in red wax. You crack it. A commission not to list donations this time, but to write down memories, names of the dead, who they belonged to, what they were good at, what song made them cry. The temple wants them recorded so the city doesn't forget itself. You think of that request as an act of civil obedience against oblivion. You begin. Hannah, who braided other people's hair before her own. Lucius, who swore at his sandals and loved his sister. Rivka, who always hid fresh bread for the widow down the lane. Marcellus, who pretended to hate cats. You run the stylus until your hand cramps, and then you switch hands. When night comes, you sit by the window. Rome glows lamps, torches, the reflection of each in 1,000 polished pots. Gaia snores on your doorway bed, a ridiculous, beloved buzz. The city is still here, so are you. The plague is a shadow, but it cannot swallow every light. What is life like in this pandemic? It is bargaining with fever and scalding garlic and laughter that chokes on blood but returns anyway. It is the stubborn work of remembering names so the city can stand in the morning and say them. It is choosing to write down little truths when big lies try to eat the world tomorrow. You'll carry your wax tablet to the temple and trade stories for rosemary. Tomorrow you'll show Gaius how to boil the willow because he needs to know it for someone else. Tomorrow is the only miracle you ask for, and sometimes the gods or the grit of a human body say yes. Asterisk bells. Too many and too often, not the clean peel of feast days, but the broken tin of grief. You're Pietro, apprentice to a painter who used to say, "Color is the proof that God loves humans enough to show off." Today the world has two colors, ash and fear. Sienna's streets run like veins through a body that can't stop bleeding. You keep to the wall as you walk less from fear of contagion. Though that fear is a thick coat and more because the center of the street is reserved for the carts of the dead now. Your master sent you to fetch lime. He wants it for plaster. The city wants it for bodies. You buy 2 sacks. You carry one home and leave one at the magistrate's door. You tell yourself this counts as balance. At the workshop, panels lean like patient men along the walls. A Madonna stares from a half-finished face, gold leaf waiting for a careful hand. Your master's hand used to be steady. Lately it shakes even when he sleeps. He kisses his fingers before touching the gilder's cushion as if sanctifying a crime. Your job has grown simple. Grind pigment, stretch canvas, boil glue, pray. You do them in order. The pestilence drapes itself over the city like damp wool. First the merchants fell silent, then the tailors. Now even the gossipers speak in whispers, as if sound itself could draw death closer. Your mother insists on laying out a cloth by the door every morning. A little ritual of tidiness in a world that refuses to be tidy. She its edges with a palm, and nods at it like a general inspecting troops. Small order, she says, or else the big chaos wins. You pass a church where the door stands propped with an overturned bucket. Inside, a priest coughs between prayers, and a line of people, thin, grey, eyed with too much knowledge shuffle toward a bowl of water and a dirty cloth. A woman leaves a loaf on the step and backs away. She waits from a distance to see who takes it. The loaf disappears. She smiles and cries at once and pulls her shawl tighter, though the day is warm. Back at the workshop, your master sits with a panel in his lap, brush hovering. It should be a blue that feels like clean, he says. What would you call that? You say, heaven, and he snorts. Heaven is for people with time. He dips his brush, then stops. The brush shakes. He puts it down in the afternoon to men you know by sight past the door with the stretcher. A child peeks out from a window, eyes too old, then disappears. A third man someone you once saw flirting at the well counts under his breath as he sprinkles lime over a ditch. You want to hate him for counting. You can't. Counting is a net. It keeps the mind from falling. You grind azurite until your shoulder hums, and your master tells you to stop because there's no point in preparing blue for a city that bleeds red and black. We paint again later, he says. Even grief gets bored of itself. He tries to smile. It almost works. Asterisk. Evening adds a sweetness to the air. You wish you didn't notice. Wood smoke, onions, that little grey cat who's adopted the shoemakers. Stoop rubs against your ankle like the world is still a reasonable place. You kneel and scratch his head and he purrs as if you earned it. A small miracle, cheap and priceless. Your father returns late, shoulders bowed, hands raw. He's been helping dig since last market day. The ground is hard, he says, looking at his palms like they betrayed him. You wash his hands with warm water. He flinches, then sighs. And you understand love can be a bowl. News comes with the night. The flagellants will arrive tomorrow, bleeding their backs in a parade of penance, believing they can beat God into mercy. Your mother makes the sign of the cross and then murmurs the old prayer her grandmother taught her before the new prayers replaced it. All the strings, she says. We pull all the strings. When the morning breaks, the flagellants do, too. They snake through the streets in a rhythm that makes your teeth feel like instruments. They chant, they cry. They collapse and rise slick with their own pain. Some people kneel, others stare. A few jeer quietly. You watch from a doorway. Arms held tight to your sides, as if body language could keep your blood from leaving your veins. Behind them, two men carry a painted board with a crude image of a demon turned away by a storm. The perspective is wrong, the sky too small. Your master scoffs, then coughs, and then sits because the room tipped. He has a fever by evening. It gallops, foams, demands you know what to look for. Everyone knows now. You look anyway, hoping to be wrong. The swelling comes in his groin hot, hard, human. Don't touch it, he says, and you don't. You touch his hand instead. You keep a cloth on his brow and whisper the names of blues he taught you because words can be cool. He says, if I sleep, will you finish the Virgin's left eye? You say yes. He falls into the kind of sleep that runs, chased by dogs. You take the smallest brush, you wet the tip. You lean in and place a dot of black where seeing should be. The eye looks at you. You look back and dare it to look away first. The city muffles itself at night now. Before, Siena liked to be heard song leaking from windows, arguments conducting themselves in the street-like theatre. Tonight, even the rats tread softly. Your mother lies on a pallet in the corner, breath thin and regular. Your father is up on the roof with a bucket of ash to douse sparks from neighbors' chimneys, because it is better to be useful than to imagine. At dawn, your master's fever cracks him open like an egg. He turns his face to the wall and then back, a man searching for a window. You give him water. He drinks as if apologizing. You forgive him for nothing because he did nothing wrong. At noon he is quiet. Your father comes down from the roof and says the lime you brought to the magistrate was used. He saw the white, like new snow, like something pure that lies. You help carry your master with two men who knew him as a boy. They say he once painted a donkey and made it look like a saint. You laugh, surprised by the sound your throat can make. At the ditch, there are bodies under cloth and bodies under nothing. You whisper the names of blues while you lower him. The sky is a blue you can't afford. Back home, the panel with the half-finished Madonna watches. You cover her with linen, so she can be surprised by the world when she sees it again. You sweep because sweeping is religion now. Your mother presses bread into your palm and says, eat. You do not taste it. You do not have to. What is life like inside the Black Death? It is lime that serves both art and burial. It is boys turned counters. It is a brushstroke for an eye that might never be seen. It is a cat purring like a benediction, and a bowl of water that makes a father flinch and heal. It is a city refusing to forget color even while the world insists on grey dot. At sunset, you climb to the roof. Siena is terraced fire and shadow. Somewhere, someone sings a lullaby, not because there is a child, but because the city needs to hear the sound of comfort. Sneaking down the alleys, your hands smell like glue and garlic and hope. Tomorrow, if your body lets you, you'll lay one leaf of gold on the Virgin's halo. You will do it like a dare-to plague, to fear, to the ash-colored certainty of death, and you will make it shimmer. Asterisk the posters said welcome home, boys, and the brass band marched on Broad Street as if a parade could bargain with a virus. You watched from a stoop, hat low, hands in pockets, trying not to breathe too deeply when the cheers hit your face like a warm wave. That was a week ago. Now you're Clara, a volunteer nurse with a borrowed armband and a jaw that hasn't unclenched since the funerals. Ran out of wood. You wake to the clatter of a pan and the cough of the woman in the next room, a cough that ends in a wet sigh that makes you want to throw open the window and let all the air out. Light is thin at the edges of the blinds. Your hands are cracked where soap has tried to wash the day away and failed at the emergency. Hospitaler school, rebranded by cots and fear. The hallway smells like Lysol, sweat, and the sweet iron of blood. The chalkboards still list fractions. The new math is different. Breaths per minute, degrees of fever, days since onset. You tie your gauze mask and tell it a small joke. Be enough. It does not laugh. The first ward is quiet in the dangerous way. People sleep too hard, mouths open, skin riding the line from flushed to blue. You read the chart at the foot of a bed. A Sanchez, 26, laborer. Day 3. He looks older because uncertainty adds years. Good morning, you say, because normal words are a spell. His eyes flutter. You lift water, tilt, wait. He swallows. His breath rattles like paper. Across the room, a boy no more than 19 tries to sit and can't. His lips are stained with the purple of bad oxygenation. Hey, kid, you say, and he bristles. A boy wanting to be called a man. Corporal. You correct, he nods, relieved. You turn his pillow, thump it just enough to look competent, and whisper, "You made the parade worth it, you know." He blinks gratitude that doesn't cost much oxygen. By mid-morning, the ambulance brings 3 more. 1 you can help. 2 you can't. The one you can help is a seamstress named Maggie who tried to hide her breathlessness behind politeness until the stairs took it away. You find her abed by a window with light that doesn't accuse. You set a basin of steaming water and eucalyptus under the cot. You tilt her up just so. You listen as her lungs argue with themselves. You argue back by keeping her calm. Panic is a thief. You keep your hand on the purse. Lunch is a slice of bread and a glance at the clock. There's a nurse older than you by 20 years who calls everyone honey and holds people's hands when they start to drown from the inside. You learn how to hold properly so someone can feel tethered without stealing the air from their chest. You don't think about how you learned this from a woman who learned it from someone who learned it on a battlefield in the afternoon. A rumor, the parade was a terrible idea and a triumph at once. Morale up, numbers up. The math does not care about brass bands. A doctor with sleeves rolled to the elbow curses aspirin because people swallow it by the handful and bleed into their stomachs. Another says aspirin keeps the fever from burning the body alive. You add medicine disagrees with itself to the list of things that are true. A man in a suit arrives to inspect. We're doing everything possible, he says. You look at the row of cots and the one towel you've been wringing out between uses and decide not to answer. There'll be masks required on the street, he adds. Theatres are closing. A nurse 2 beds down says, good. He pretends not to hear the weight in the word. At 4 o'clock, the mortuary boys come. They wheel, lift, sheet, tag. You swallow hard on the metallic taste in your mouth. You write names on cards with a hand that shakes later, but not now. J. Alvarez, M. Davis. Unknown, unknown is the worst. Grief with nowhere to go. A mother arrives with a child in her arms, both red with fever. The child is limp in that way that makes your heart try to climb out of your throat. You take the child. The mother claws at your sleeve. Please, she says, as if the word is a recipe. You say, I know, as if the phrase is a cure. You tip medicine into a mouth that doesn't want it. You win that battle. You will not win them all. By evening, the city outside has changed its tone. Streetcars run half empty. A man hawks newspapers through a mask, his voice thin and stubborn. Headlines contradict themselves. Victory near and bodies stacked. Your mind can hold both truths. Your heart cannot. You compartmentalize like a professional traveler. Socks here, grief there, hope in the outside pocket, night shift. You walk the rows with a lantern that turns the room into a moving theater. People watch your light like it's a promise. You will come, you will check. You will wake them if they stop being here. You do, a man stops. You call for the doctor with a voice that keeps its edges. The doctor comes. You both do the things that are done. You write the time. You adjust the sheet. You move to the next bed, because that is the prayer you get to say asterisk. Near midnight, Maggie's breathing changes. It deepens, not that shallow flutter that means the body is sipping from a broken cup. Relief trickles through you. You hate that it feels like stealing from someone else's tragedy. You touch her. Forehead, cooler. You'll stitch again, you say, and she nods, tears soaking her mask. You forget to scold her for wet cloth. You let the tears do their antiseptic work. A young doctor leans against a doorframe and admits he hasn't slept. In 2 days, you pour coffee that tastes like anger and tell him to sit. I can't, he says, and you say, I wasn't asking. He laughs once, a quick bark, and sits. He sleeps for 7 minutes and wakes like a man running. You want to put your hand on his shoulder and transfer steadiness. That's not how anatomy works. You hand him a clean mask instead. At 2, you step outside to breathe air that hasn't been exhaled by a room full of lungs. The crescent moon looks like a cut that might heal. A policeman tips his hat with 2 fingers. You think about the parade, again the way bodies want to be close to. Other bodies, the way joy wants a street. You forgive the city for wanting joy. You will never forgive the timing. You walk back in and a volunteer says your name like a small alarm. The boy you called corporal is turning bluer. You pull the head of the bed up higher. You talk to him. About anything but breathing, because the brain listens to the mouth sometimes. After, you say, you're going to teach me how to keep a rifle from jamming. He grins without air. I can teach you to cuss like a corporal, he says. You say, I learned that here. At dawn, someone wheels in a gramophone and plays a hymn at a volume that pretends not to be scared. The music moves through the room like a nurse with soft shoes. A woman in bed for mouths the words, and you mouth them too, though your church is a basin, and your altar is a shelf of brown bottles. What is life like in the Influenza of 1918? It is a city that throws a parade and then learns to whisper. It is gauze masks and ungloved kindness and aspirin disputes and the math of oxygen. It is writing unknown with a pen that dents your finger and saying someone's name softly so the room remembers humans aren't just lungs. It is the skill of keeping your voice steady while your heart yells. It is seeing the blue leave a seamstress's lips and letting relief be a meal. You finish your shift, shoulders gravel, hands raw. The sun edges over rooftops like it's surprised. We made it to morning. On the walk home, you pass a window where someone has pinned a sign. Thank you, nurses. You want to cry. Instead, you tuck the words into the pocket where you keep the good things that have to last all day. You close your door gently behind you and sit on the floor because chairs are too formal for this kind of tired. You unwrap your mask, wash your hands, wash them again, and let the water run just to hear a sound that's not coughing. In an hour, you'll go back. In this pandemic, mercy is measured in minutes, and you are rich if you can spend them well. Asterisk, the first sound is of them. Turkeys startled from a fig tree explode into the morning like brown confetti, and for a heartbeat you imagine a good day, washing gourds in the canal, grinding cacao, checking on the neighbor who delivers babies with hands that never shake. Then the second sound arrives, coughing, the kind that sounds wet and wrong even from 3 doorways away. A dog whines. Somewhere a pot breaks. The good day folds itself small and hides. You are Zachital, apprentice, midwife, and collector of herbs, who knows 50 names for green. Your world is the Great Lake City the Spaniards renamed, but your mother still says Tenochtitlan when her guard is down and the syllables bloom like lilies. They say a pestilence has begun Cocoliztli, the destroyer, but people have been naming death longer than anyone has been writing it down. Names don't slow it, they only let your mouth keep up. You wake your little brother cutely, who sleeps with his feet pointed at the door, always ready to run. Fetch water, you tell him. From the far conduit, he grimaces. The near cistern is closer, but women came home yesterday red-mouthed, not from dye but from bleeding. He nods. Good boy. Anne takes the long gourd, walking fast but pretending. It's not fear that quickens him. Your teacher, Nenatal, mutters from her sleeping mat. Her hair, white as burnished bone, looks heavy today. The air feels wrong, she says, not looking at you, as if the wind learned a new word. You press your palm to her shoulder. Stay, I'll go. She hates to stay. She hates to be still, but the ache in her breath says yes for her. The market, usually a riot of sound, is a careful hush. Women no longer haggle. They nod once, pay, leave. Flowers your cities, prider, fewer. The marigolds look embarrassed to be bright. At the edge of the square, a Spanish friar sprinkles holy water from a pewter bowl and intones a prayer that trundles like a cart through mud. Beside him, a physician from the hospital clutches a leather bag, eyes darting as if looking for a fact he misplaced. Recognize him. Diego. He visits Nenetal sometimes to trade European herbs for Nahua ones, both of them pretending it's science when really it's need. Today his collar is crooked. Today he looks like a man who slept with his shoes on. He sees you and steps forward. Senorita Ixchitl, he says. Spanish thick on your name. Is your teacher well? You inhale to answer and stop, because a girl not much younger than you is sitting in the path with blood trickling from her nose, quietly as a leaky jar. You kneel. Her eyes are glazed with heat. You tip her head forward and pinch gently. The old way, the blood slows, then starts again, brighter. Diego crouches beside you and opens his bag. He produces a cloth, a smell you associate with churches, and a furrowed brow. He looks at you like a question, like permission. Cool water, you say. Willow bark. No bleeding with knives. He nods, surprising you, and barks for a boy to bring water. It arrives hot from the sun. You pour it from one bowl to another, until it forgets some of its heat. The girl sips. She shudders. She doesn't die, not yet. The day adjusts its shoulders. By noon, the city is sweating. Heat climbs every wall and hides in each clay pot. The disease is faster than gossip. Neighbors who visited in the morning clasp their bellies by evening. People begin to bleed from places that should mind their own business. Nose, mouth, ears, throats swell. Heads pound with a blacksmith's hammer. You have helped women through childbirth grunts, pushes, prayers. Blood like a river that knows its way. This blood is different. It's untamed. It drips from people sitting still. You and Nenatel move like a two-handed prayer. She mixes epazote and willow and sampantli leaf, named for skulls, but used for fever. You pound, strain, sip, apply. She murmurs to the plants, as if coaxing them awake. You murmur to patients, as if coaxing them to stay. A Spanish soldier's wife lets you in, though her eyes hate you on behalf of centuries neither of you asked to carry. Her husband coughs red into a linen decorated with red. Hold his hand, you tell her. She hesitates, then obeys, and the room gains a heartbeat at dusk. Cutely returns, with water and a wild story. A Spaniard down by the docks has set a pile of cloth on fire, and a priest slapped him and blessed him at the same time. Everyone is wrong, he says, voice cracking, and everyone is certain. You give him a strip of sweet amaranth paste and tell him he's done well. He chews like the world is slow enough to taste. You hug him longer than is practical. Night is not. Quiet. The city tries. It fails. Coughing punctuates the dark. Somewhere a drum beats the way grandfathers taught it to, reminding the air there were songs before this. Beside you, Nenatul rummages in a basket for cochineal, for dye, not for medicine. For the eye, she says. Not theirs, ours, we. Must remember the world is a loud color. She stains a thread bright and ties it around her wrist. You do the same and feel not braver but less alone. In the morning, Nenatal's lips are too pale. She coughs once. The sound is small and not small. Old wood burns quickly, she says, and you say, you're not wood. She smiles like someone who's taught you to lie kindly. No, she agrees. I am a root. Roots sometimes survive fires. You decide this is a rule. You go out alone. The friar waves incense like a man fighting smoke with smoke. Diego appears from an alley, face ashen. They made a hospital in the palace, he says, but the air inside is thick with breathing. We carry out the dead before the morning is done. He swallows. Will you? He doesn't finish. You know what he wants. Not a herb. A witness. You follow him into a hall where once peacock feathers brushed the floor. Now pallets line the walls, and every pallet holds a body that needs you to believe it's still a person. You check pulses. You cool foreheads. You wet lips. A child calls for her mother in Nahuatl, and a nurse answers in Spanish, and love understands both. A man with beads around his wrist asks you to sing the old prayer. You begin softly, in the corner of your mouth. A nun glances over, frowns, and then doesn't stop you. Asterisk. At noon, a wind rips through the courtyard, hot and thin, and half the room seems to shudder at once. Bleeding noses drip. Men spit red into bowls. The floor becomes a map of places you will mop until your arms forget their names. Diego tries. A European powder on a woman's gums, and the bleeding slows enough for her to fall asleep. He stares at the bowl like the moon just changed its mind. We don't know anything, he says, sounding relieved to admit it. You hand him Cocoliztli bark to steep. Learn, you say. He nods, a student again. You run supplies back and forth to Tenochtitlan. Each time you return, she looks thinner, but her hands still work like small birds, the quickness, the precision. The way they know what air is for. She teaches you 3 more plant combinations and makes you repeat the names until they sound like family. If I go, she says, casual and enormous, you remain. That evening, you let yourself picture. Outside, fields that need planting, canals that need dredging, songs that aren't funeral songs. You let yourself imagine a harvest where your hands ache for reasonable reasons. You let yourself be greedy. In your mind, Nenatel sits on a step, complaining about young knees, and you roll your eyes and pass her a cup. You drink the imaginary cup first to prove it can be done. Behind the hospital, 2 men hurl insults while hauling bodies. The Spaniards brought this. One snarls, the other spits. No, the gods did, because we forgot them. A third says nothing and keeps lifting. You want to argue with both. You want to bless the third man's silence and put it in a jar for later. You keep carrying water. On the 4th day, your brother doesn't return by noon. Panic is a trapdoor. You fall through. You run the canal's edge until your chest burns worse than the heat and find him perched on a wall, swinging his legs, staring at a woman washing bloody cloth in water that will carry the story of her grief to every house. Downstream, he looks at you with a face you don't recognize, yet the face of someone who knows exactly how fragile you are. I came back, he says, more promise than report. You nod and grip his wrist until your fingers hurt you. Nenatel wakes from a nap as if coming back from far. Her first words are a question. How many did you teach today? Not help, teach. You count to nurses, 1 friar, a boy at the door who brought a chickpea mash and left with willow bark and instructions. She smiles, a thin crescent. Then we have not wasted the day. At dawn, on the 7th day, Nenatar's nose bleeds. It is a thin ribbon on her lip. She dabs, tuts, and reaches for Achillea. Your chest climbs into your throat. She treats herself like a stranger, firm, unafraid, thorough. You stay behind your teeth, she says, to her own blood, and it listens for an hour. It comes back. You do what she taught you. Cool cloths, patience, songs. She giggles when you try to sing the low notes. You were made for the high ones, she says. And somehow it sounds like a benediction, not an insult. The city learns new grammar, fewer verb tenses, more imperatives. Bring, boil, hold, name, bury, plant. Pray, some days you don't speak at all, your hands sign for you. Other days words rush out because silence feels like a second fever. You hear of villages emptied, of hills newly named for the dead, of Spanish ledgers that cannot keep up, of Nahua elders who remember older sicknesses and say, this one is a stranger even to them. Diego begins to write side-by-side lists. Plant. and purpose, symptom and salve, Spanish guess and nahua, certainty. He leaves spaces blank on purpose. You respect that. Weeks later, when anyone who was going to die quickly has died, and the slower ones have chosen their direction, you sit beside Ninotel under the shade of a fig tree, the same tree that startled the turkeys. A breeze remembers how to be cool. The city is quieter, but not gone. The market returns in threads. Children play with a solemnity you've never seen before, and then, suddenly, a howl of ordinary giggles breaks out, and you weep because that sound is rebellious. Nenatal leans her head against your shoulder. I used to carry a basket this big, she says, pride and disbelief sharing a bed. Now I carry 2 herbs and my tongue. She lifts your hand and kisses your knuckles. You carry the rest. What is life like inside Cocoliztli? It is red on white cloth and names exchanged between languages until both speak better. It is a friar learning to hold a bowl while you sing an outlaw prayer. It is a boy who takes the long route for water without complaining. It is teaching, while grief chews your ankle. It is tying a bright thread on your wrist to remind your eye that beauty did not go anywhere. It just sat quietly while you fetched breath. You walk home at dusk with cutely skipping rocks into the canal. Each skip a punctuation mark in a sentence you intend to finish. The wings you hear are not turkeys now, but herons, slow and deliberate, writing their name across the sky in strokes even the Spaniards can't rename. Asterisk the brush paints a red cross, 2 strokes thick, on a neighbor's door. The paint glistens like a wound. Above it, in a tidy hand, more honest than the city deserves, the watchman writes, Lord have mercy upon us. He looks younger than that prayer. He looks tired enough to sleep standing. You look away before he looks up. You are Thomas Reed, night watchman in St. Giles in the Fields, hired when the parish decided the living need guarding from the living. Your job is simple and impossible. When a house is marked, you nail it shut. When a widow pushes bread through the lattice to her own child, you pretend not to see if it keeps the child quiet and the street calmer. When a man offers you a shilling, to look the other way, you remember your wife's voice saying we eat by your honor, and you let the shilling burn a hole in your palm before you hand it back. Mourning is a ledger, bills of mortality in neat columns chrysoms, apoplexy, fever, rising of the lights, and the new favorite, plague. You read numbers like a gambler reads dice, hoping the roll shows a miracle. The numbers are bad at miracles. You start work before dusk, when shadows are polite. A woman across the lane is beating a rug with theatrical energy, daring death to be invisible. A cart rattles by, piled with turnips, carrots, gossip. The gossip today says they've shut the playhouses in, sure, but also laughter shut. You are not a theatre man, but you mourn personally. Laughter had a job. It's unemployed now. At the first house on your list, a maid answers with her apron over her nose. We've no plague, she says, voice bright with panic. You point with your chalk at the spots on her arm. She looks, she does not cry. You like her more for it. You'll need water, you say, and someone to set it down where you cannot touch hands. Do you have bread? She nods. Flour, she adds, practical. You nod back, professional courtesy between 2 people who now understand delivery. You hammer the boards. The sound brings faces to windows, a row of moons in a street sky. 2 weeks you call through the door. I'll be by, the maid says. Thank you, sir, like you've given her something she can fold and put in a trunk at the second house. A man spits at your boots. It is a good spit, practiced. He snarls that he'll not be jailed in his own rooms. You look at his child behind him and imagine a small ghost at the window. Sir, you say, and the word tastes like vinegar. I do not argue scripture, but I must nail. He squares himself like a soldier. You square yourself like a fence. At last he steps back and mutters something about Parliament. You nail, he shouts. You listen as if to rain. Night slides over the city like a thief with soft shoes. Torches bloom in doorways, little suns that know better than to be bright. The men with dead carts begin their rounds, calling in long vowels that carry down alleys. Bring out your dead. Sometimes they sing it, and you hate them for finding a tune. Sometimes they whisper it because a child sleeps. You love them for that. A woman with a shawl around her shoulders too thin for the weather. Too clean for grief approaches, you holding a coin and hope. She says her husband is inside, not sick, just sad. He wants air, she wants bread. If I open, you tell her, 3 neighbors will see and 10 will tell. And by morning we will have 20 doors open and 1 ditch more full. She nods, as if she rehearsed your line before you said it. She closes her fingers around the coin, keeping the heat. Will you at least step aside, she asks, so I may speak to him? You do. You listen to her murmur through wood. You've never heard love sound so much like a recipe. Asterisk. Rats gossip at your feet. You kick, lazy, unconvincing. The miasma smells worse in August. The night air is thick with rot and tallow and a sweetness you distrust. Somewhere a cat yowls with the drama of an opera. You miss opera. You never saw one, but you miss the idea. Near midnight, a runner from the parish finds you. A pit at Aldgate is open. He pants. They need men. You don't dig. You watch. You carry lanterns. You tell yourself, this is logistics, not cowardice. The pit is a mouth. It swallows. A minister paces the rim reading psalms. The wind eats his words. A boy, too small to lift anything, sits at the edge and counts. You want to take the counting out of his hands and throw it away. Instead, you give him your water and he drinks without looking up. His lips say 8. You go home at dawn when the city looks like a body after a fever, sweaty, exhausted, not dead yet. Your wife Anne curls her feet under herself on the stool and says nothing. The nothing is kind. She places a mug in your hand and you do not taste it. You look at your child sleeping and feel the temptation that ruins men, the wish to lie. You pet her hair and tell the truth instead. I'll wash, you say, then sleep. She nods, then, the way women nod when approving small plans in a world where big ones fail. You dream of doors. You wake to knocking. A boy stands there with a note in a hand that shakes. For the watch, he says, as if you are a single person, as if the note can change the road. You read, the pest house is full. Send lists, not bodies. You tear the note to light the lamp. You tie your mask, more superstition than science, and step back into a city that has started to whisper. The worst day is a Sunday when bells try to pretend they are not funeral bells. Sunlight buttered across rooftops looks indecently cheerful. A woman leans out a window and lets blue sheets flap in the light, daring the world to call her foolish. At a marked house, someone sings a psalm, and 3 doors down, a man is telling a joke too filthy for God. The city wants to be itself, and the plague wants the city to be quiet. They compromise poorly. At dusk, a gentleman with ink on his fingers, some clerk who keeps a diary for future strangers, asks you how it is. You are tempted to say, right, that we were brave. You are tempted to say, write that we failed. You settle on, it is work. He scribbles as if that were poetry. Maybe it is. A woman with eyes like a cat's approaches carrying a covered basket. Sir, she says, I must bring broth to my sister. You nod toward the bricks nailed. Across the sister's door, pass it through the hatch. She hesitates. It will spill. You look at the street, then at the basket. You murmur, I am walking that way. She hears what you did not say. She slides the basket into your hands. You stroll, unhurried, as if delivering soup were your birthright, and angle the lid to keep the steam. You do not knock. You cough once. A hand appears through the hatch, takes the basket, disappears. You keep strolling. You are the law. You are a brother. Rumors sidewind. The rich have fled to the country. The king sent money. The plague doctor at Holborn wears a beak stuffed with herbs and still fainted in the street. A comet started it. Sin did. Rats did. Who cares? You stop listening when listening stops being useful. Autumn makes a promise with its cool breath. Numbers on the bill begin to dip. The city peeks from behind its door the way a child does after hiding too long. Shops open with abbreviated hours and swollen prices. A barber offers bloodletting and a cheerful story. You buy the story and skip the knife. You walk past a theatre and the painted boards of a comedy look back at you as if you're the joke. You tip your hat. Another time, you say, and the boards understand. In September, the wind changes, the smell changes. Your work changes from sealing to unsealing. You pry boards loose with the same hands that nailed them, and people come blinking into air that feels like grace. Some houses stay dark. You open anyway, as if light might smuggle someone back. Anne meets you halfway down the lane one evening, face bright with a smile so unused it squeaks. You did it, she says, meaning we. You say, we endured. She kisses your forehead, a blessing you didn't earn and needed anyway. What is life like in the Great Plague? It is writing a prayer on a door in paint that shines to red. It is refusing a bribe you could justify because justification is a thin soup. It is learning the architecture of grief, where to hammer, where to leave a hatch, where to look away so our kindness can be smuggled. It is watching a boy count bodies at a pit and giving him water because numbers cannot drink. It is the hinge of a city's door turning from shut to open and squealing like it has feelings. A year later, a different fire will scour these streets, clean and mean, and people will say it burned sickness from the city. You will know better. It burned houses. It did not burn memory. You carry the keys to doors you hammered and unhammered in your pocket long after the pockets wear out. When someone laughs in a playhouse again and coughs once and the audience freezes, you will be the man who forces a small, brave chuckle back into the air. The city needs practice, like a muscle needs a weight. You will spot it. Asterisk, the harbour smells like salt and spice and risk. You stand at your desk with quill in hand, the ledger yawning for dates and weights and names. In the roadstead, a ship rides at anchor black hull, snap of canvas, the flag of the Grand Saint Antoine, back from the Levant. The silk merchants have been salivating since May. The city's fairs are hungry. Your job, Jean Valette, clerk, for the Bureau de Santé is to make the harbour behave like a healthy lung. Breathe in, pause, breathe out. Quarantine is the pause. Everyone hates the pause. A messenger scuttles in, powdered wig askew, and drops a letter sealed in wax with a crest that does not belong to medicine. You break it and feel heat climb your neck as you read. expedite clearance, cargo urgent, assurances presented. You know this handwriting, someone who dines where you don't, someone who thinks the sea can be bribed. You put down the letter and pick up a smaller one, your own, hand addressed to the lazaretto on the Frial Islands. Hold, you wrote, at dawn, watch for fever, burn what smells wrong. You blot it with more force than paper deserves. A pilot boat brings the Grand Saint-Antoine closer. Through the glass, you watch figures on deck, thin, purposeful. You meet the captain later, in a room that suddenly feels too warm. He looks like a man carved from rope. He says all the right words and none of the right things. Losses at sea, he says, eyes calm, nothing contagious. He offers documents that say the same in beautiful ink. Your finger catches on a corner. The paper is soft from handling, the way lies are. You send men to inspect. They come back quiet. One scratches at his neck. They're clean, he says, not meeting your eye. You stare at his nails. They are bitten ragged. That night, a merchant presses a purse into your palm with the casual intimacy of a lover. The fare at Beaucaire waits, he murmurs. The city needs money. War eats coin. War does not pay us back. You think about your wife, Claire, counting candles, cutting cheese thinner. You think about the lazaretto keeper who lost a child last winter and still does his job with eyes that can read a horizon. You lift the purse. You set it back on the merchant's table. The city needs breath more than silk, you say. He smiles in that thin way powerful men do when they have a plan B, of course. He says, we will breathe. They unload at night. Not you, not your men. Other men, brisk and paid, with torches that cast the kind of light corners, learn too. Hate, you wake to the rumor in the fish market. A woman says her brother saw bales of Levant silk rolling like barrels toward warehouses with private keys. Another woman crosses herself so fast she could spark fire. A boy ties a red string round his wrist because his grandmother said red. Confuses death. Asterisk, the first bodies appear in the quarter near the rope walk. A washerwoman gone grey in a day. A porter, strong as rope, shrunk to string by dusk. The physician scribbles notes about buboes, about fevers that don't understand the courtesy of gradual. The bureau meets and talks and uses words like containment, with the briskness of men who have never had to contain a scream. You suggest the obvious. Burn the ship, burn the silk, build a cordon. The room inhales as one. Someone coughs, the cough of politics. You go home late to a small stew and a big argument with yourself. Claire lays a hand on your arm, the way she used to when the baby cried and you could not make your fingers remember gentleness. You did right, she says, uninvited, accurate. There are men who can sleep through their own lies. You are not one day's tangle. Death now has an address in every district. The chorite fills. The bishop walks, blessing, and tells people to fast as if hunger is a new idea. The Chevalier Rosa organizes carts, teams, pits. He moves like a knife through rope. You deliver orders to burn linens and spices and grains. People weep over whole rooms carried to the square and tossed to flame. You watch a woman kiss a bolt of silk before she lets it go. The cloth puckers and burns like a secret. Asterisk. Men build a plague cordon on the road's northern line of soldiers. Ditches, palisades, to keep Marseille's breath from blowing into Provence. You ride out to see it. The wind tastes of ash and bay. A farmer stares at you with a hate you understand. His cart waits, axle greased, life loaded. The soldiers shake their heads. He shakes his fist. You ride back with grit in your teeth that is not all dust. At the port, a galley burns, a pyre taller than common sense. The flames write letters on the sky. The ship protests with groans as if insisting on a few last sentences. The men cheer and cry and cough. You stand with your ledger under your coat and rain ash onto your shoes and think of the first tally you made as a boy boxer of anchovies. All numbers, no names, and how all ledgers eventually learned to write the living in pencil and the dead. In ink in your office, a courier delivers a letter sealed with the king's wax. Do what you must. It is permission and indictment, both late. You post proclamations. Mask the face with vinegar cloth. Carry rosemary. Don't gather. Don't flee. People do all for badly. The perfume makers make a killing pun unintentional, then intentional. You no longer have the energy to rescue. Words. Claire asks if you will send her and the child to the countryside. You picture the cordon, the muskets, the farmer's fist. No, you say, and you hate what the word makes you. She wraps bread in a cloth and tucks it into your bag with a kiss you feel for an hour afterwards like a bruise that makes you grin. The lazaretto keeper writes. He lists the deaths on the island with a neat hand that does not look tired, so you know he wrote it tired. I burn what I can, he says. I pray without telling anyone. You write back. I write without telling anyone, he replies. Same sin. You laugh for the first time in weeks, and the laugh sounds like something breaking. Maybe it is breaking open. One afternoon, in a narrow street near the soap boilers, you find a boy sitting in the sun counting to 100 and back again. What are you doing, you ask. He doesn't look up. Keeping the sky up, he says. And you stand guard while he reaches 99, because you do not want to know what happens if he stops. Winter comes, like an apology. The numbers tip. The carts go out later. The pits fill slower. You build. A habit of walking to the quay at dusk. Ledger under your arm like a second rib. Smoke has taught the sky a new color. Gulls sit on pilings and stare as if they have jurisdiction. The harbor breathes, one shallow breath, then another dot, when at last the bureau votes to stop the auctions, to burn the remaining silk that has not already wrapped a bride or a corpse. The merchants howl like men robbed. You supervise the burning personally, quill in your pocket, ink frozen. The bales resist, then yield, a sweet stink of dye and loss. A scrap lifts on an updraft and tacks toward the street like a guilty flag. You pluck it from the air. It is the color of a saint's robe. You stuff it into the fire with a fury that has been looking for a throat. What is life like in Marseille's plague? It is a letter from a powerful hand that says hurry, and a letter from a tired hand that says hold. It is a purse you put back on a table and sleep anyway. It is watching silk burn and letting it feel like a baptism you wish you had not attended. It is making a wall out of men and hoping their nerves are taller than their bodies. It is a boy counting the sky up and down and your decision to stand there until he gets it right. 2 years later, people will say it was the last time Europe saw plague like this. They will be right and wrong. Last is a word for bookends. Life is a shelf that sags. You write the final entry in a ledger and the ink blot looks like a ship. You blow on it, gentle, and for a second it looks like a gull. You go home and let Claire untie your neckcloth. You put your head in her lap and breathe like a man who has permission again. Asterisk, the first telegram reads like gossip. Strange influenza. In St. Petersburg, stop, spread, quickly stop. You tap the reply key with the calm of a woman who can make electricity sit and heal. Acknowledged, stop, will monitor stop. You hang the slip on the brass spike and get coffee you will forget to drink. You are Frieda Adler, telegraph operator in a busy Berlin office. Conductor of a symphony whose instruments are keys, wires, and the strange tensile hush of people waiting for news. The city hums with invention electric lights, streetcars, a new department store that smells like leather and possibility. The newspapers celebrate progress with italics. Then the wires bring something that shrugs at progress. In 3 days, Hamburg wires, cases appearing, stop railway lines, crowded stop. In 5, Vienna, operetta, closed singers, ill stop. In 7, London, press calls, eat Russian flus stop, not certain anything stop. You hang slip after slip until the spike leans. Like a mast in wind, you are good at 2 things, speed and accuracy. Today, you add a third, mapping. You sketch the continent in pencil on the blotter and mark each city as the code comes in. The dots bloom like spilled ink along rail lines, along telegraph routes, like the disease is reading Bradshaw's timetable. Sometimes you pause and let your finger rest on Berlin, a pulse you pretend to slow with touch. Your supervisor, a man who trusts machines more than people, tries to chide you for doodling. He stops when he sees your map. He looks at your pencil. Continue, he says, which is as close to praise as the wires get. You work with 2 other women, Lena and Greet, who know how to wrap a wire with their knuckles to soothe it when it misbehaves. Lena says she feels a tickle behind her eyes. Greet says her bones ache like she danced in boots. You tell them both to sit, to drink, to stop pretending women are not allowed to be ill. They both claim mothers tougher than yours. You roll your eyes. You keep a private list of how many cups of tea you bully down their throats. Bullying is love in a uniform. The station master from Alexanderplatz writes on official paper in a hand you want to applaud. Conductors absent, stop crowds, cough. STOP advise. You do not have advice. You send the message up the chain to men who can write decrees. The decree comes back. Clean your carriages. You clean your desk instead. With vinegar, because doing something false feels better than doing nothing. Day 4. Your supervisor coughs the kind of cough that makes you think of damp cellars. He ties a scarf and calls it warmth. You tie a scarf and call it solidarity. A doctor stops by to check on the office girls in a way that feels like kind curiosity dressed as authority. He recommends rest. You recommend fewer recommendations. He laughs and lays a hand on your forehead with the clumsy gentleness of men who are used to steel, not skin. You pretend to be offended. He pretends to leave. He returns at lunch with broth in a jar and a blush. You drink the broth. You both agree not to call this courtship. It is too fast for your heartbeat and too slow for the wires. In the evenings, you take the long way home, buying extra bread for the widow in your building and a small cone of roasted chestnuts for yourself because heat tastes like courage. The taverns are half full and loud with opinions. The papers debate whether this is modernity's tax strains, carrying breath as efficiently as coal. One writer calls it the first telegraphed plague. You circle the phrase with your pencil and underline. Telegraphed because the wire carries news faster than fever, which is something, if not much. By Christmas, the city knows the litany. Fever, back pain like a mule kick, eyes like sand, a cough that wears a man's ribs thin. People fall and rise and fall again. The second wave is a rumor until your map says otherwise. Glasgow wires. Second attack, worst stop. Paris, they call Itala grip. STOP. You and Lena and Greet take turns on night shift and watch the snow come down soft, as if the sky were trying to muffle the city. You keep a new map in your pocket, not the spread, but the small mercies. The baker on Onter den Linden who insists on 2 rolls for the price of 1 if you cough. The neighbor boy who leaves oranges on doorsteps and runs like a thief. The conductor who leans out between stops to ask passengers for their mothers' best soup recipes and writes them down with the seriousness of treaties. You draw tiny stars by each stars are data too. Asterisk. The day you finally fall sick, you do not pretend otherwise. Your hands shake, the key stutters under your fingers. You pass the stool to Lena and walk home through a city that tilts slightly, as if the cobbles changed their minds. The doctor meets you at your building because he reads your wires like love letters. He tucks blankets around you like treaties. Fever drags you under. You dream in dots and dashes, the world speaking in your language. You laugh in your sleep at a joke your body made in code. 3 days are stolen. On the 4th, you surface. The window is fogged. Someone has written Frida in the condensation, which is both corny and perfect. A small parcel sits on your chair. Gloves, wool, the kind that make you feel the possibility of future winters. The doctor snores in the other chair in a posture that cannot forgive his spine. You love him for that imperfection suddenly and completely and in a way that makes you laugh, which wakes him, which makes him blush, which makes you cough. Romance is silly. Bodies are silly. The flu does not care. Back at the office, you find your map pinned to the wall, edges curled, new marks added in hands not as neat. You are annoyed for exactly 1 second before pride burns the annoyance away. You add the newest dots. New York, the cable brought it. Buenos Aires, Bombay. The wire is a nervous system for a planet that isn't sure it likes being one body. When it gets sick, the message arrives before the fever does. You circle that too. A rumor stems from Russia about electricity causing illness. A rumor from Berlin blames new reading habits, eyes strained by too much evening light. A rumor from everywhere blames the other city. You add none of these to your map. Your map wants verbs, not villains. By spring, the wave has spent itself, like a drunk who finally found a bed. People come out into the light, blinking like foxes. Shops clean the air with bravado and vinegar. The newspapers declare modernity victorious over an old foe, which makes you snort into your coffee. Little boys run kites between the rails like dares. You watch your doctor frown at a man spitting in the street, and you feel the squad of small futures you have been flirting with step forward for inspection. A home with a window, a shelf for a radio that hasn't been invented yet, a table with 4 bowls, a pencil always within reach. What is life like inside the 1889-90 influenza? It is sitting at the center of a web you did not weave and feeling the tremor of each strand like a plucked string. It is making a map that honors 2 kinds of truth, where the illness goes and where kindness flares. It is being brave enough to be a patient and arrogant enough to be a cartographer. It is hearing the planet say, I am one in the stutter of a key, and believing it even when your lungs disagree. On your last night shift of the season, a wire crackles from Reykjavik, late to the party, stubborn as a rock. First cases, stop still. Snowing, stop. You plot the dot on your map with a shiver and a smile. You write back, not protocol, not official, Just a human reply you will tear up before the supervisor returns. I see you stop, we hold steady stop. You hang the slip on the spike and finally drink your coffee, cold and perfect and, for once, enough. Asterisk televisions hum in living rooms like polite guests, and the evening news anchor speaks with the voice of a man who never sweats. A new influenza, first identified in Asia. Cases now appearing across US cities. The map behind him blooms with dots, tidy and distant. You click the set off because distance is a luxury you don't have. You are Dorothy Hale, school nurse for Lincoln High in a factory town outside Chicago, where the mornings smell like toast and machine oil. Your office is a narrow room between the gym and the principal suite, a steel cabinet of thermometers, a sink that takes its time, a poster from the March of Dimes, reminding the corridor of polio's manners. You still remember the summer, of iron lungs, the hiss of air that sounded like a lie and a promise at once. After polio, people thought they knew what fear felt like. Then the year turned 1957, and fear introduced itself in a new suit in May. The Communicable Disease Center, still small, still punchy, still in Atlanta, sent mimeographed sheets with words like H2N2 and hemagglutinin, a vocabulary you felt in your bones before your tongue trusted it. By September, the first wave had become a surf, kids showing up pink-cheeked and glassy-eyed, a temperature that leapt like deer, coughs that sounded like a classroom full of old men. You lined them in cots, wrote notes home, called mothers who answered with voices already hoarse from other children. The principal, Mr. Denby, kept his tie tight and his hopes tighter. "We'll try to stay open," he said at every council meeting, eyes flicking to the attendance ledger like it could save him. He wasn't cruel, he was practical. Factory lines needed parents, parents needed school. The world aspired to normal. The way a fever aspires to climb. You invented rituals to feel larger than a virus. Thermometers nestled in the crook of arms like secrets. You set a kitchen timer for 3 minutes, and sometimes pretended it ticked longer. A mercy for the child who needed another breath before facing the hallway. You wiped down doorknobs with alcohol until the corridor smelled like a hospital that had learned to smile. You taught hand-washing like it was algebraist boys. Exact, repeat until the body knows it without thinking. By October, classrooms looked like half-finished puzzles. Desks sat empty as if their owners had been pressed flowers. The science teacher, Mrs. Porter, wrote the virus's parts on the blackboard and drew a cartoon of one with a little hat. The students laughed because they were 17 and generous. That way, the football coach tried to hold practice with 6 kids and a mutinous wind. On Friday nights, the band tuned to an audience of parents spaced like punctuation marks across the bleachers. The town's clinic to doctors, 1 X-ray. An ambition started Saturday shot hours when a vaccine finally arrived. Miracle was a big word, but people tried it on. The first shipment was small, promised to hospital staff and the elderly. The second came tucked in dry ice, white cold mist that made everyone look like they were stepping out of heaven. You volunteered to help, hands in latex, smile under a starched cap. People lined the sidewalk in coats and hope, sleeves already rolled. The kid who fainted at needles last year brought a dime store comic to cover his eyes. You let him pretend it worked. The mayor shook the doctor's hand for the newspaper photos. They both held their breath. Still, the flu had its own schedule. A father died on a Sunday that never stopped being Sunday in his kitchen, roast in the oven, the clock polite, the radio playing a hymn he hated. A teacher's baby coughed and then slept too deeply. The teacher didn't return for a month. The mortician ran out of his favorite casket screws and used ones he'd been saving for an exhibition. Numbers on the back pages of the paper earned front-page fonts. 1 million worldwide, the radio said. Then more than we don't know. In the lunch line, the cafeteria lady spooned mashed potatoes with a flourish that dared anyone to talk about death around her gravy. Asterisk, you learned to read faces. The girls who still wore lipstick were either well or stubborn. The boys who stopped combing their hair were either sick or in love. The janitor, Mr. Knox, started whistling a hymn under his breath while mopping, which meant he was worried in a way he didn't have words for. You started humming along so the worry had company. At home, your husband Earl coughed exactly twice, the second one longer. You felt the distance between those coughs like a fall. You brought him tea, told him to sleep in the back room, turned the radio low so it wouldn't wake him, and so it would those two reasons perched like sparrows on the same wire. He took a week to come back to himself, a week in which you learned the exact weight of his empty chair. When the factory staggered under illness, the manager tried split shifts to stagger bodies too. The town council voted for a temporary dance hall closure, then unvoted when the owner showed them his books. The newspaper printed advice from a doctor in a boatie about staying home and printed an advertisement for a department store sale. On the adjacent column, people read both and chose according to their mortgage. On a Saturday in November, you staffed a mass vaccination clinic in the high school gym. Nurses moved like a choreography learned the same morning. Fill, swab, jab, press, smile, next. A man in a fedora fainted stylishly. A farm kid didn't even blink. The pharmacist barked numbers like an auctioneer. The PTA served coffee that could have revived the dead. Somewhere, because there is always somewhere, supply fell short. And you watched the last vial tilt and empty and felt a slackness in your knees with a shape you recognized from prayers. Church on Sunday sounded like relief rehearsing. The minister talked about neighbors. He was not a poet, but the word landed well. After service, 3 women compared their vaccine-sore arms and laughed like girls. Laughter began to come back. In fits, a feral cat coaxed toward the porch with saucers of milk. The winter wave proved what waves are for. Return. You had thought it done. It wasn't. Teachers whose knuckles had just stopped aching with worry started again. At the hospital, the night nurse's shoes squeaked from a floor so clean your own face looked tired in it. Your white cap began to feel like a small flag you could plant in rooms to claim them for the living dot in the spring. The virus thinned like a rumor that couldn't find new mouths. The school year staggered across the finish line with grades that felt more like handshakes. Graduation robes rustled. You watched parents take photos with delight that bordered on belligerent. No one was going to take this ceremony from them, not even history. The band played a march that sounded like a promise, and this time no one coughed in the important rest. What is life like in the Asian flu? It is a steel cabinet of thermometers that begin to feel like prayer beads. It is teaching a 17-year-old how to wash hands and pretending that makes you taller than a microbe. It is a gym-turned-clinic where the line to be jabbed looks like civic virtue in coats. It is split shifts and polite rules and impolite realities, and a janitor whistling a hymn into bleach. It is a vaccine vial tilting near empty Anatowns, patients refusing to do the same. And it is the quiet miracle of a spring concert of flutes a little sharp. The trumpets proud where the loudest sound in the room is relief remembering how to sing. Part 10, Hong Kong. 2003, SARS elevators become rumors. You take the stairs, not because your legs like it, but because you don't trust the box that recycles other people's breath. Every lobby smells like bleach and apology. Every forehead gets a thermometer from a guard who looks like he didn't. Train for this part of the job. Mask, please, he says, and the city obeys. Cloth over worry, paper over prayers. You are Lay-Weiling, infection control nurse at Prince of Wales Hospital, a place that used to feel like a ship, big, loud, purposeful, and now feels like a submarine sealed, humming, every breath counted. The word SARS arrived like a whisper with a passport. A doctor from Guangdong stayed in the Metropole Hotel, coughed into a door that many touched, and the virus learned the city's map faster than any taxi. Your pager did not stop until it became a second pulse. Inside the ward, you wear a matrix of protection, N95, surgical mask over it, face shield, gown, double gloves. You tape your sleeves like a person sealing a crate. The gear makes everyone look like cousins and equally unrecognizable. You write your name in block letters across your chest with a smiley face that fogs as you sweat. Patients learn to read those letters as if they were voices. SARS teaches everyone how air behaves. An aerosolized cough is a river, negative pressure. Rooms become chapels. Doors close like punctuations that matter. You show young nurses how to strip gloves without turning your hands into enemies. How to bend the metal strip across your nose so your breath goes into the mask instead of up into your eyes. Your voice inside the face shield sounds like a radio playing in another room. You speak slowly. You repeat. You watch their hands. Fear makes hands stupid. You forgive the hands and speak to them directly. The first week, Amway Gardens becomes a word that tightens throats. An apartment block where the virus rode on plumbing, on air currents. Across a courtyard like a rumor that didn't need a mouth. The city hard, bright, used to speed learns quarantine as a behavior, not a suggestion. Entire towers get taped at the lobby. Food deliveries sit like offerings outside doors. A policeman nods to you with eyes that have seen too many doors. Visitors are cut off from patients, so your ward becomes a postal service. You smuggle in photos, grandchildren holding up fat crayons. Dogs with tongues out. The harbour at night for the ones who miss neon. The old man in bed 12, a retired tram driver, asks for the sound of bells. And you find a recording, clang and hum and a ding that remembers roots. He cries behind his mask and says how tin, who tin so sweet to herond, you count this as medicine on your chart. Colleagues get sick. That sentence takes up less space on paper than it took in your chest. Doctor sang jokes at morning huddle on Tuesday and is in a bed on Thursday. Cheeks flushed the wrong way. A porter you shared cigarettes with last month coughs like newspapers, describing storms. You go home to your small flat, leave your shoes at the door like a sin. Scrub your hands until the skin looks surprised at how much attention it's getting. Your mother calls from Suwon and tells you not to be heroic. You tell her you are not heroic, only busy. She doesn't believe you. Mothers are immune to certain lies. Outside, the city edits itself. The star ferry still crosses, but quieter. Lan Kwai Fong still glows, but the laughter is 3 drinks shorter. Street markets invent hand-washing stations with buckets and foot pumps, ingenious and ugly and perfect. No spitting signs suddenly mean something beyond respectability. Even the air-conditioning repairman wears a mask. Blessed be the man who breathes for a living and chooses to do it politely, who issues advisories. Airlines cancel flights. Hotel lobbies arrange chairs farther apart like furniture, practicing social distancing. Your younger cousin loses hours at his restaurant. Your uncle's wholesale stall stacks boxes no one claims. The economy coughs. The government stands at podiums with graphs in a seriousness that says we are learning as fast as we can. You have never loved competence more, and you have never forgiven its absence, less dot in the ward. The sound you memorize is oxygen, the gentle hiss that says lungs have help. Some patients drift toward recovery, a slow reverse, fever easing, cough gentling, appetite waking like a cat nosing the corner of a dish. Others do not. SARS is a coin toss, loaded at its edge. You hold phones to ears for goodbye calls. Sons speak to fathers with a formality they think will hold them together, and then fail and call their dads Baba like they are 6 again. You want to put your hand on their shoulders and the phone on speaker and tell the virus no. You do not get to say no to physics. You get to say it to despair. It hears you half the time. The ritual of donning and doffing becomes a sacrament. You supervise it like a priest at an altar, strict because love is strict when it has to be. A nurse tries to skip a step to get to a patient faster. You pin her with your gaze, and she blushes above her mask and slows. You set up a mirror so everyone can check their seals. People cry in front of the mirror sometimes, silently, and then square their shoulders as if the mirror were a friend who will not gossip. Hong Kong is a city of food, and even in disaster it eats. Colleagues leave kanji on the break room table. Plastic wrapped buns, oranges with the peel nicked for easier opening. You drop a note, eat. You are not a machine. Someone adds, if you are a machine, you still need oil. Laughter smells like sesame oil for an hour. Containment works slowly until it works fast. Contact tracing the city's new detective novel draws lines no one can see but everyone follows. Flights are screened, temperatures taken, schools shut their doors with a sigh. The number of new cases flirts with 0. On the day it lands there, the ward feels like a church after a storm. Pews intact, windows smeared, candles still burning. Congregation changed. When the last SARS patient on your floor tests negative twice and walks carefully down the corridor. The clapping starts in bed 9 and spreads, weak hands finding the rhythm like children. He bows as if this were an opera and not a hospital, and you bow back because grace belongs anywhere. What is life like in SARS? It is writing your name on your chest so strangers can see you underneath plastic. It is teaching the choreography of gloves until terrified hands become skillful hands. It is an entire city agreeing to edit its breath together. Thermometers at doors, masks on ferries, elevators that wait empty because stairs feel like math you can still do. It is phone calls where sons become boys and nurses become bridges. And it is the soft return of streets, the ding of a tram, a bowl of noodles eaten 6 feet apart. A smile you can only see in the eyes, reminding you that caution and love are the same shape when you look at them from the right angle. Asterisk. The road to Calahan is the color of iron and the shape of a promise you don't know if you can keep. Dust coats everything, the mango leaves, the goats, your tongue. At every bend, there's a bucket and a bar of soap and a person with resolve. For a face, wash, they say, and you wash, fingers interlaced, thumbs like you're wringing a cloth. No touch becomes a greeting. The air feels deprived of handshakes and still manages to be full of hands. You are Mariama Conte, community, health volunteer, the kind who knows every auntie by her laugh and every footpath by its gossip. Before 2014, your life was babies, coughs, burns from cooking pots, malaria that you could spot with your eyes before a thermometer confirmed it. Then Ebola came like a secret that kills fast. Fever, vomiting, diarrhea, bleeding sometimes, mostly just a drowning inside. The radio said the word virus over and over until it stopped sounding like English and started sounding like a drum. The first training was in a cinder block room with posters and too little shade. The team from Freetown wore vests and worry. They spoke of PP, either moonsuit sand of bleach at 1 part per 10, and of chlorine in buckets at entrances and no-touch burials. They said vomit and blood and sweat like lists of places to build. Fences, they said don't more than they said do, and you understood why. Survival was subtraction. Touch less, gather less. Kiss air. Your village has never liked subtraction. It is a place of crowded porches and shared bowls and a greeting that starts with a hand and ends with a hug. You became the fight's translator. No touch without no love. You found the words. We can be close with our mouths, with our eyes. We can cook and leave the bowl. We can keep each other alive by pretending we are strangers, for now. Some nodded, some wept. One old man said he would rather die, hugging his grandson. You said you would rather live to hug him later. He scowled like a man who had been out-argued by his own heart. The E2U Ebola treatment unit rose from a field of grass like a fortress built of tarps and hope. Fences, tents, a decontamination corridor, a gate where the world divided into red, zone, and green. The first time you wore PPE, it stole your breath hood, face shield, mask, double gloves, apron. It felt like dressing as a storm. The process to put it on took 7 minutes. The process to take it off took 9, and your whole life concentrated in each step. Outer glove, sanitize, apron, sanitize, face shield, sanitize, hood, sanitize, inner glove, sanitize, wash again, again. You repeated the steps like you were learning a dirge. Your partner watched you with eyes like a hawk made of love, ready to slap your hand if it wandered. You did the same for her. This is what trust looks like when the air itself feels armed. Inside, patients lay on cots under tarps that rattled for any reason and for none. The first time you crossed into the red zone, the sound that pinned you was bucketser, 100 small rains, water, bleach, vomiting, washing. You learnt the language of small sips, ORS oral, rehydration solution, and paracetamol, and antibiotics for when it isn't Ebola and malaria when it is both. You learned who would likely live, the ones who kept drinking, who cracked jokes through cracked lips, and who would probably not, the ones who turned their faces to the wall and stopped watching the door. Death changed its uniform. No more family washing. No more cries of women at the graveside where grief has a place to stand. Safe and dignified burial teams arrived in white suits, moved like astronauts, prayed through masks, zipped the bags, sanitized the earth, marked the spot. People called them thieves, then, slowly, called them brothers. In the beginning, rocks chased the burial trucks. Later, water did, the buckets and soap people used before waving them on. Stigma grew like mold in the corner's heartbreak. Forgot to sweep. Survivors came home with certificates and weak knees. Some neighbors welcomed them with songs. Some whispered which, as if that could explain a body the virus failed to keep. You and the survivors formed a caravan, rice oil, a small allowance, a bigger loudness. You brought a woman to her own door and stood there with your hands in the air like a hostage and said, "Look, she is our sister. She is safe. If you will not touch her, I will not touch you." The neighbor's eyes did math. The door opened. Contact tracing became the job and the sermon. You followed names like trails through the bush. Mother, neighbor, taxi driver, the pastor who prayed too close, the auntie who brought stew and left tears. When you reached them, they lied and they didn't, all at once. You talked until the word trust felt like a bowl that could hold a fever. The 117 hotline numbers burned into your tongue. You said, when we call, answer. When you feel hot, say, so, we are not the police. We are the ones who will carry water until the fire listens. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes funerals happened at night, fast, quiet, the old way. You did not sleep well those nights. Your own body joined the story one hot afternoon when your cousin Abdul staggered to your porch, bleeding from his gums, eyes like windows that know a storm. You stood up so fast, your chair fell, and the sound of the chair was the sound of your heart. You put your hand in the air, fingers shaking. "Stop," you said, and he did, crying like a boy, calling your name. You called the ambulance and heard your voice sound like someone put courage on it, like a mask. You waited with him 10 feet away, talking about goats, about football, about the time he stole mangoes and blamed the wind. You followed him to the gate of the ETU and stopped because love had rules now. He lived. The day he walked out with his certificate, you wanted to pick him up. You settled for ululating until your throat hurt. He laughed because your ululation sounded like a car alarm. The radio became the village's second son. No touch. Wash hands. Don't hide the sick. The DJ played palm wine music between announcements, like sugar between medicines. School closed, but soap school opened. Children lined up at buckets, practicing 20 seconds like it was a dance. They made up a song, back of hand, between the fingers, thumbs, and you cried because a virus had taught. Your children a chorus, and your children made it beautiful anyway. When the curve finally bent, when case counts dropped, like rain after a dry season, you did not throw your mask in the air. You kept washing, kept tracing, kept speaking not yet to celebration. And then there was a day when the ETU's tents looked too big for the bodies they held. That day, someone brought a drum to the gate. People danced at a distance that still felt like dancing. The burial team posed for a photo and looked like men who had been mistaken for monsters and were now letting the sun tell a different story. What is life like in Ebola? It is rubbing chlorine into your knuckles until your fingerprints feel new. It is saying no touch and meaning I love you. It is counting names for 21 days and walking toward people when everything in your bones says run. It is a moon suit in heat, and the patient who jokes, "You look like a ghost, sister." It is burying with dignity what culture wanted to hold, and convincing culture that dignity counts. It is the ululation you do with your hands instead of your throat, washing, waving, pointing the way to a gate, and waiting there until someone you love walks back out. Asterisk. Sirens smear the city's soundtrack into one long blue note. In March, you didn't notice them. In April, you breathed in time with them. By May, you could tell ambulance brands by their Doppler howl. The avenues were empty Times Square A. Stage with nobody on it. Fifth Avenue, a runway built for ghost sex, except for the people who couldn't be empty. Delivery workers on bikes. Janitors with keys, nurses in sneakers. At 7 p.m., a city that had been holding its breath exhaled an applause you could feel through closed windows. You are Luis Ramos. respiratory therapist at Elmhurst Hospital in Queens. A borough that speaks in at least 100 languages and names coffee in 20. Your job in 2019 was machines. In 2020, it is still machines. But now the machines feel like fragile bridges between two worlds. Ventilators hum. BiPAP masks hiss. You fit oxygen cannulas to faces that look like your TOs, your neighbor es abuela, the bus driver who lets you on when your Metro card is sulking. You tape names on foreheads. NAMR, Sing, R, DIA. Zebeca's PPE has made everyone faceless. The first weeks started as a rumor from Seattle, from Italy, from Wuhan, images of hospitals that looked like science fiction. Then the fiction moved in. Your unit doubled, then tripled. Wars turned into ICUs with walls made from cleverness and plastic. PPE became a rationed sacrament. N95S counted like communion wafers. Gowns that rustled like uncertainties. Face shields cut from craft store plastic and stapled to foam as if ingenuity were medicine. You wrote your name in Sharpie across your chest so people could remember there was a person under the shield who loved salsa and hated raisins. In the ear, the oxygen saturation numbers glared like bad grades. 68%, 72%, numbers that made even seasoned nurses blink. Patients arrived speaking full sentences. I'm okay, just a little short of breath. And then, the next hour, the floor learned a new way to move as a team. Roll, lift, intubate. You threaded tubes with hands that had memorized the angles years ago and still shook behind the gloves. You adjusted vents, danced with pressures and volumes, felt like an organist playing the biggest church in the world with your shoulders on fire. The proning team became your family, 2 nurses, a med student, you flipping bodies like heavy prayers, face down to coax lungs open. You learned who tolerated it and who fought. You placed pillows under chests with tenderness you didn't know your back could carry. You learned the choreography of turning someone with lines and tubes and hope attached. 1, 2, 3, and the breath sounds changed, like a radio station finally tuning in. Phones replaced visitors. You perched an iPad on a cart that had once held magazines and mints, and dialed numbers from charts with shaky circles around emergency contact. Daughters held up toddlers, their faces close to the camera, and you brought the device to a face behind a trellis of clear tubing and said he can hear you. One son said te amo, Poppy, like he was placing a stone on a grave, and then said it again because stones need company. You put the iPad away and went into the stairwell and slid down and counted your breaths until numbers meant oxygen again. Outside, the city invented kindness at scale. Javits Center turned into a hospital. A ship docked with beds. Field tents sprouted in Central Park like stubborn hope. Restaurants cooked for the hospitals. Sandwiches with notes in baggies for the heroes, and you ate between alarms and tasted mustard like it was summer and you were off duty. Your building clanged pots at 7 p.m. You stood on the ambulance bay steps in scrubs that smelled like acrylic and clapped. Back at a city that was clapping. And for 3 minutes a day you felt like this might end in a story you could tell without editing. Supply chains became jokes you could not tell. You wore the same N95 for a week, rotating it in brown paper bags like loaves of bread. A nurse decorated hers with stickers to make it feel less like a muzzle. A doctor cried when a box of donated respirators arrived because the straps were the good kind that don't snap. The hospital's biomedical engineer became a celebrity for coaxing old vents back to life with parts sourced from a forum that felt like a backyard garage. April was a month of numbers and names. The number of beds, of vents, of admissions, of discharges. The names of colleagues who got sick, and the names of those who came back, and the names of those who didn't. Angel, an environmental services worker who always had a joke, didn't show up. The group chat became a rosary. You prayed without pretending you knew how. The city's streets held refrigerated trucks, white and mute. You walked past them every shift and didn't look until you did. And the looking took something from you and gave you something back. Resolve, maybe. The hard kind you can carry like a tool. Your girlfriend, Nadia, stayed at her sister's in the Bronx because your one bedroom was too small for a quarantine you could trust. You ate alone, FaceTimed, slept with sirens for lullabies, then it bent. The admissions slowed. The vents' alarms sang less often. You allowed yourself to say, maybe followed by she. Discharges became events balloons, applause. The Here Comes the Sun playlist you'd rolled your eyes at and now loved like a cousin. A man who'd been intubated for 3 weeks stood with a walker and cried into a mask and clapped for you while you clapped for him. Outside, parks filled cautiously with distanced bodies, learning how to occupy the same photo again. Normal did not return. Something else did. You learned the shape of long COVID, long grief, long lists of names in your head. Your buildings, super still, wore 2 masks in the elevator, and you nodded because rituals are how people stay upright. The hospital restocked PPE like squirrels hoard. The city opened and closed like a book someone kept rereading. You became a connoisseur of tests, PCR, antigen, the little strip that bloomed a second line like bad news in pink. Vaccines arrived like dawn, slow at first, then obvious. The first morning you rolled up your sleeve in the cafeteria. You cried because needles had never felt like gifts before. You stood in a line of colleagues, shirts off one shoulder, eyes wet, the room buzzing like a hive of relieved bees. You FaceTimed your mother in Puerto Rico and showed her your bandage, and she crossed herself twice and said, "Gracias," like the word had been waiting since spring. What is life like in COVID New York? It is sirens and paper-bagged masks and Sharpie names on plastic shields. It is a proning team turning bodies like pages you refuse to hear. It is iPads becoming chaplains and a 3-minute cheer at 7 p.m. that keens into your bones and rearranges your idea of neighbors. It is a vent alarm, an engineer with a screwdriver, a donated tray of empanadas with a note that says, Palante. It is refrigerated trucks and determined tulips pushing up anyway in a median on Queens Boulevard. And it is a band-aid on your arm and a city that learned, imperfectly and together. That solidarity is just another word for breathing and rhythm. Asterisk across 2.5 millennia, the details change: boats, beaks, buckets, bags, herbs, hand sanitizer. Heparin, but the through line does not. People leaning toward one another even when they must lean without touching. What was life like during history's worst pandemics? It was not only fever and numbers, it was practice, of care, of caution, of stubborn joy. It was the sound of water poured over hands, again and again, as if the world could be made new by repetition. It was the quiet, daily refusal to let death write every line.